Imagine this, a live TV debate, bright studio lights shining down on two people sitting across from each other. One of them is calm but ready to pounce, while the other looks confident, almost smug. The energy in the room is electric. You can feel it even through your screen at home. This wasn't just another boring political discussion. It was about to turn into something unforgettable. On one side of the table sat a man known for his sharp tongue and bold statements. He had spent years working behind the scenes in powerful positions advising some of the biggest names in politics. Now he was here, front and center, using his platform to share his views with millions of viewers. His name? Kash Patel. People either loved him or hated him, but no one could deny that he knew how to make an impression. Across from him was someone very different. A woman who had only recently stepped into the world of national politics. She came from humble beginnings and worked hard to get where she was today. Her story resonated with many because it felt real, relatable. As a freshman congresswoman, she wasn't afraid to speak her mind, even if it meant going against the grain. Her name? Jasmine Crockett. And tonight she was stepping onto a much bigger stage than usual. The topic of the debate was supposed to be serious: immigration reform, civil rights, and economic policies. These were issues that mattered deeply to people all over the country. But as everyone tuned in, they didn't realize that this conversation would take a dramatic turn. It wouldn't just be about policy. It would become personal. As the host introduced both guests, you could already sense the tension brewing between them. Their body language said it all. Kash leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, wearing a slight smirk. He looked like he thought he had nothing to lose. On the other hand, Jasmine sat upright, focused, her eyes scanning the room as if preparing for battle. She seemed calm, but there was a quiet intensity about her that made you think she had something up her sleeve. The first few minutes of the debate went smoothly enough. They exchanged opinions, disagreeing politely at first. Kash argued his points passionately, throwing out statistics and examples to back up his claims. Jasmine listened carefully before responding, choosing her words wisely. She spoke clearly, making sure every sentence carried weight. It was clear that both of them were skilled debaters, but their styles couldn't have been more different. Kash's approach was aggressive. He interrupted often, raising his voice when he wanted to emphasize a point. Jasmine, on the other hand, stayed composed. She let him finish his thoughts, nodding occasionally to show she was listening. Even though they clearly didn't see eye to eye, it was like watching two boxers in a ring, circling each other, waiting for the right moment to strike. What made this scene so fascinating was how relatable it felt. Everyone has been in situations where they've faced someone who thinks they're better than them. Maybe it was a boss at work, a teacher in school, or even a family member during a heated argument. Watching Kash and Jasmine go head-to-head brought back those feelings. Some people rooted for Kash, admiring his confidence and willingness to take charge. Others cheered for Jasmine, seeing her as the underdog fighting for respect. But then, things took an unexpected turn. Kash decided to push harder. He started challenging Jasmine not just on her ideas but on her qualifications. That's when the tone of the debate shifted completely. What had started as a professional exchange turned into something far more intense. Little did anyone know, this moment would spark a chain reaction that would leave a lasting impact, not just on these two individuals but on the entire nation. Stay tuned because what happened next changed everything. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Up until now, the debate had been intense but mostly professional. Both sides were throwing their ideas back and forth, each trying to outsmart the other. But something shifted when Kash decided it was time to take things up a notch. He wasn't just going to disagree anymore, he wanted to dominate. It started subtly. At first, he began interrupting more frequently, cutting off his opponent mid-sentence. His tone grew sharper, almost mocking. "Let me stop you right there," he said at one point, leaning forward with a smirk that screamed confidence, or maybe arrogance. The audience could feel it too. This wasn't just about winning an argument anymore. This was personal. Then came the moment everyone would talk about for days. Kash leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest like he'd already won. With a smug grin plastered on his face, he dropped the line that sent shockwaves through the studio and millions of living rooms across the country. "You're just another inexperienced politician trying to ride the wave of outrage culture," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. The words hit hard. For a split second, the room fell silent. Even the host seemed caught off guard, hesitating before moving on to the next question. It was the kind of insult that felt designed not just to undermine someone's argument, but to attack their very identity. Kash wasn't simply debating policy, he was questioning whether Jasmine belonged in the conversation at all. Jasmine froze for a brief moment, her expression unreadable. Was she surprised? Angry? Hurt? No one could tell. But if Kash thought his comment would rattle her, he was wrong. Instead of reacting immediately, she took a deep breath, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. Her eyes locked onto him, unwavering. There was no fear, no hesitation, just a quiet determination brewing beneath the surface. For Kash, it must have felt like a victory. He probably expected her to stumble, to fumble over her next response, or maybe even retreat into silence. After all, he'd seen plenty of opponents crumble under similar pressure. But what happened next proved that he had underestimated her completely. What made this moment so gripping wasn't just the insult itself, it was the context. Viewers at home weren't just watching two politicians argue. They were witnessing a clash of personalities, values, and experiences. Kash represented a certain type of figure, brash, self-assured, and unapologetic. To some, he was a hero. To others, he was everything wrong with modern politics. And then there was Jasmine, who embodied resilience and authenticity. She hadn't risen to where she was by backing down from challenges. Every step of her journey had prepared her for moments like this. As the seconds ticked by, you could almost hear the collective gasp from viewers around the world. Social media exploded within moments. People were typing furiously, sharing clips of Kash's remark and speculating about how Jasmine would respond. Some cheered him on, praising his boldness. Others condemned his rudeness, calling him out for resorting to cheap shots instead of sticking to substantive arguments. But amidst all the noise, one thing was clear. The ball was now in Jasmine's court. Would she rise to the occasion, or would Kash's jab land the knockout punch he seemed to think it would? Everyone held their breath, waiting to see what she would do next. And then, finally, she spoke. Her voice was calm, but carried an undeniable edge. When she opened her mouth, it wasn't to defend herself against his accusation. It was to dismantle it entirely. What followed was nothing short of extraordinary. Stay tuned, because this is where the story takes a turn nobody saw coming. When Jasmine finally spoke, it wasn't just words coming out of her mouth. It was power. Her voice was steady, calm even, but there was an unmistakable sharpness to it. It was the kind of tone that makes you sit up straight, the kind that says, "Pay attention, because I'm about to say something you won't forget." She leaned forward slightly in her chair, her eyes locked onto Kash like a laser. There was no hesitation, no fumbling for words. She didn't raise her voice or lose her cool. Instead, she delivered her response with surgical precision, each word landing like a punch. "Let me tell you something," she began, her tone measured but dripping with sarcasm. "I may be new to Congress, but at least I didn't build my career by hiding behind lawsuits and propaganda campaigns." The room froze. For a moment, it felt like time stood still. Even the host, who had been trying to keep things moving, stopped mid-sentence, clearly stunned by what he'd just heard. Kash's face, meanwhile, told the whole story. His smirk disappeared almost instantly, replaced by a look of disbelief. He blinked once, then twice, as if he couldn't believe what he'd just been hit with. What made this moment so electric wasn't just the content of her response. It was the delivery. Jasmine didn't yell or scream. She didn't resort to name-calling or insults. Instead, she used logic, wit, and a touch of sass to completely dismantle Kash's earlier remark. And she did it in a way that felt effortless, like she'd been waiting for this moment her entire life. But she didn't stop there. Once she had his attention, and the attention of everyone watching, she went in for the kill. She pointed out how hypocritical it was for someone like him to question her qualifications when his own track record was far from perfect. "You talk about experience," she continued, her voice growing firmer with every word. "But let's be honest here. You've spent more time dodging accountability than actually getting things done." By now, the audience was on the edge of their seats. People at home were glued to their screens, replaying the clip over and over again. Social media lit up like wildfire. Clips of Jasmine's response started flooding platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Viewers couldn't get enough of it. Some were laughing at the irony of Kash's reaction, while others were cheering Jasmine on, praising her for standing her ground. Her words weren't just aimed at Kash, they resonated with anyone who had ever been underestimated or dismissed. Women, people of color, young professionals, and underdogs everywhere saw themselves in her. She wasn't just defending herself, she was speaking for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong, and that's why her response struck such a deep chord. Kash, on the other hand, looked like he'd been caught off guard. His confidence seemed to crumble right before our eyes. He tried to recover, mumbling something about misunderstandings and taking things out of context, but it was too late. The damage had already been done. His earlier bravado was gone, replaced by awkward stammering and forced smiles. It was clear that he hadn't expected this level of pushback. As the segment continued, Jasmine kept her composure, answering follow-up questions with the same calm authority. She didn't gloat or rub her victory in Kash's face. Instead, she stayed focused, using the rest of her time to highlight the issues she cared about most. But everyone knew what the real story of the night was. Her clapback had stolen the show, and there was no going back. Even after the cameras stopped rolling, the buzz only grew louder. Late-night talk show hosts couldn't resist weighing in, replaying the clip and adding their own commentary. One host joked, "If sass were an Olympic sport, Jasmine would have just won gold." Another called her response the ultimate mic drop moment. Memes started popping up everywhere, turning her words into internet gold. For viewers, it wasn't just entertaining, it was empowering. In a world where public figures often shy away from confrontation, Jasmine had shown that it was possible to stand your ground without losing your dignity. She proved that being polite doesn't mean you have to be passive. You can be respectful and still pack a punch when it matters most. And while Kash tried to brush off the incident in interviews afterward, claiming he hadn't meant any harm, it was obvious that he was feeling the heat. Analysts began digging deeper into his past, uncovering details that only added fuel to the fire. Suddenly, the tables had turned. What was supposed to be his moment to shine had become his biggest headache. Meanwhile, Jasmine emerged from the debate stronger than ever. Supporters rallied around her, praising her poise and intelligence. Donations poured into her campaign fund, and invitations to speak at high-profile events started rolling in. Her team seized the momentum, turning her iconic response into a rallying cry for accountability and authenticity in politics. Looking back, it's clear that this wasn't just a single moment, it was a turning point. A single sentence had shifted the narrative, not just for these two individuals, but for millions of people watching. It reminded us all that words matter, and that sometimes the best way to respond to disrespect is with grace, intelligence, and a little bit of fire. Stay tuned, because the story doesn't end here. This was just the beginning of something much bigger. The fallout from that explosive moment was like nothing anyone had seen before. It wasn't just a blip on the news cycle. It was a full-blown cultural phenomenon. Within hours, the debate clip had gone viral, spreading across social media faster than wildfire. People weren't just watching it, they were dissecting every second, replaying her response over and over again. It was the kind of moment that made you pause your scroll and think, wow, I need to see this. At first, the reactions were split. Some people applauded Kash for being bold, saying he was just doing what politicians do, playing hardball. But the majority of the conversation quickly shifted in Jasmine's favor. Her calm yet cutting comeback struck a chord with millions. For many, it felt like justice served. They saw her as someone who didn't back down when challenged unfairly, someone who stood up for herself without losing her cool. That resonated deeply, especially in a world where public figures often shy away from confrontation or resort to shouting matches. Social media became ground zero for the aftermath. Clips of the debate were everywhere, accompanied by hashtags like Omar Clapback Queen, Un Respect Her, and Mar Mic Drop Moment. People shared memes, GIFs, and even fan art celebrating her response. Late-night talk show hosts couldn't stop talking about it. One host joked, "If SAS could power cities, we'd have free electricity for life after that." Another compared her to a chess player, saying she had checkmated Kash in front of millions. These comments only added fuel to the fire, keeping the story alive for days. For Kash, things didn't go so smoothly. While some supporters defended him, claiming he was just being honest, most of the backlash landed squarely on his shoulders. Critics accused him of using underhanded tactics and questioned why he resorted to personal attacks instead of sticking to policy discussions. Analysts began digging deeper into his past, bringing up controversies that had been mostly forgotten until now. Suddenly, the spotlight that had once worked in his favor turned into a glaring interrogation light. He tried to downplay the incident in interviews, insisting he hadn't meant to offend anyone and calling it a misunderstanding. But it was too late. The internet doesn't forget, and neither do its users. Meanwhile, Jasmine's team wasted no time capitalizing on the momentum. Donations poured into her campaign fund almost overnight. Supporters flooded her social media pages with messages of encouragement, thanking her for standing her ground. Grassroots organizations started organizing events in her honor, rallying around her message of integrity and accountability. She became a symbol of resilience, proof that you don't have to sacrifice your values to succeed in politics or in life. Jasmine herself handled the attention gracefully. In interviews following the debate, she stayed focused on the bigger picture. "This isn't about me," she said during one appearance. "It's about holding people accountable, no matter how powerful they think they are. We all deserve respect, and we all deserve leaders who will fight for us, not against us." Her words resonated with audiences, further solidifying her status as a rising star in politics. But perhaps the most surprising part of the fallout was how it inspired everyday people. Women, minorities, and young professionals saw themselves in her story. They shared their own experiences of being underestimated or dismissed, drawing parallels between her situation and theirs. Teachers posted stories about students asking how they could be more like her. Parents told their kids to watch the clip and learn from her example. It wasn't just about politics anymore. It was about empowerment. Even outside the political sphere, the impact was undeniable. Brands reached out to collaborate with her, hoping to align themselves with her newfound popularity. Universities invited her to speak at graduation ceremonies, eager to give their students a role model worth looking up to. Her schedule filled up fast, but she made sure to prioritize the causes closest to her heart. Whether it was advocating for marginalized communities or pushing for policy changes, she used her platform wisely, ensuring the spotlight stayed on the issues that mattered most. As the dust began to settle, it became clear that this moment had changed both of their trajectories. For Kash, it was a wake-up call. His reputation took a hit, and he found himself spending more time defending his actions than advancing his agenda. He retreated from the public eye for a while, laying low as the criticism continued to mount. Some speculated that his career might never fully recover from the incident. For Jasmine, however, it was the opposite. The debate catapulted her onto the national stage, turning her into a household name. She went from being a relatively unknown freshman politician to a leader people looked to for guidance and inspiration. Her confidence, combined with her ability to connect with others, made her a force to be reckoned with. And while she remained humble about the attention, she also recognized the opportunity it gave her to make a difference. Looking back, it's amazing how one moment can change everything. A single exchange, a few carefully chosen words, had sparked a movement. It reminded everyone watching that courage isn't about yelling the loudest. It's about staying true to yourself, even when the odds are stacked against you. And for Jasmine, it was proof that sometimes the best way to respond to disrespect is with dignity, intelligence, and a little bit of fire. Stay tuned, because this story doesn't end here. What happened next took her journey to even greater heights and left an indelible mark on history. What happened next was nothing short of extraordinary. The debate didn't just fade away as another fleeting moment in the 24-hour news cycle. It sparked something much bigger, something that would ripple far beyond the confines of a TV studio. Jasmine's response had struck a nerve with millions of people, and it wasn't long before that energy turned into action. Grassroots movements began to take shape almost immediately. People who had never been politically active before suddenly felt inspired to get involved. Community groups started organizing rallies, town halls, and online campaigns centered around the themes Jasmine had championed during the debate: accountability, respect, and standing up for what's right. Her words became a rallying cry, a mantra repeated at protests and shared across social media platforms. It was like watching a spark ignite a wildfire, spreading faster than anyone could have imagined. Jasmine herself noticed the shift. Messages poured into her inbox from people all over the country, some thanking her for inspiring them, others sharing their own stories of overcoming challenges. A single mother wrote to say she showed the clip to her daughter, telling her, "Look at this woman, she didn't let anyone tell her she wasn't good enough. Neither should you." A young man shared how he used her example to stand up to his boss after months of unfair treatment. These stories moved her deeply. She realized that her moment on live TV had become more than just a personal victory. It had become a source of hope for countless others. Her team worked tirelessly to keep the momentum going. They launched initiatives aimed at empowering underrepresented voices in politics. Fundraisers were organized to support grassroots candidates running for office. Workshops were held to teach people how to advocate for themselves and their communities effectively. Jasmine traveled across the country, speaking at events large and small, always emphasizing the importance of staying true to your values. Everywhere she went, crowds greeted her with cheers and applause, eager to hear what she had to say. But it wasn't just about speeches and campaigns. Jasmine also focused on tangible change. Using her newfound visibility, she pushed forward key pieces of legislation aimed at addressing systemic issues affecting marginalized communities. She introduced bills tackling everything from affordable housing to criminal justice reform, making sure her actions matched her words. Critics tried to paint her as overly ambitious or naive, but she brushed off their comments, saying, "If not now, when? If not us, who?" Meanwhile, Kash struggled to regain his footing. His attempts to pivot away from the controversy only seemed to draw more attention to it. Analysts continued to scrutinize his past, uncovering details that reignited old debates. Some of his allies distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with the growing backlash. Others urged him to apologize publicly, hoping it would help repair his image. But apologies rarely work when they feel forced, and Kash's half-hearted statements did little to win back trust. Instead, he faded further into the background, overshadowed by the very person he'd tried to undermine. The contrast between the two couldn't have been starker. While Kash retreated, Jasmine stepped boldly into the spotlight, using it to amplify the voices of those who often went unheard. She appeared on talk shows, podcasts, and panels, always bringing the conversation back to the issues that mattered most. Her authenticity resonated with audiences, earning her even more support. People admired her not just for her intelligence but for her humanity, for the way she connected with people on a personal level. One particularly memorable moment came during an interview where the host asked her about the secret to her success. Without missing a beat, she smiled and said, "I think my secret is simple. I don't pretend to be perfect. I make mistakes, just like everyone else. But I learn from them, and I keep moving forward. And I surround myself with people who remind me why I'm doing this to make life better for the next generation." That answer stuck with viewers. It wasn't polished or rehearsed. It was real. And in a world filled with carefully crafted sound bites, realness stands out. People appreciated her honesty, her willingness to admit vulnerability while still projecting strength. It made her relatable, someone you could root for without feeling like you were cheering for an untouchable icon. As months passed, the movement she inspired continued to grow. Schools began incorporating her story into discussions about leadership and resilience. Nonprofits credited her with helping raise awareness and funds for causes they cared about. Even celebrities joined in, amplifying her message to their massive followings. It was clear that Jasmine had tapped into something powerful, something that transcended politics. And yet, through it all, she remained grounded. Friends and colleagues described her as the same person she'd always been, hardworking, humble, and deeply committed to making a difference. She often joked that she still pinched herself every morning, amazed at how much had changed since that fateful night on live TV. But behind the humor was a profound sense of gratitude for the opportunities she'd been given, for the people who supported her, and for the chance to leave a lasting impact. Looking back, it's easy to see why this moment mattered so much. It wasn't just about one person standing up to another. It was about reminding everyone watching that we all have the power to rise above adversity. It was about showing that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting in spite of it. And it was about proving that when you stay true to yourself, anything is possible. Stay tuned, because the final chapter of this story is where the real magic happens. This isn't just a tale of triumph. It's a blueprint for creating meaningful change. Months had passed since that unforgettable debate, but its impact continued to ripple through society in ways no one could have predicted. The moment had become more than just a viral clip or a heated exchange. It had grown into a symbol of resilience, empowerment, and the power of standing up for yourself. And as time went on, it became clear that this wasn't just a story about two individuals. It was a turning point that inspired countless others to take action in their own lives. For Jasmine, the journey was transformative. What started as a single moment on live TV evolved into a movement that reached far beyond politics. She used her newfound platform not to chase fame or glory, but to create real, lasting change. Her focus remained firmly on the people, those who felt overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed. She often said in interviews, "I didn't ask for any of this, but if it means I can help even one person believe in themselves, then it's worth every second." Her efforts paid off in remarkable ways. Legislation she championed began making headlines, addressing issues like affordable housing, education reform, and healthcare access. Lawmakers from both sides of the aisle started reaching out to collaborate with her, recognizing her ability to bridge divides and bring people together. Even those who initially doubted her came around, admitting that her determination and authenticity were impossible to ignore. She proved that leadership isn't about shouting the loudest. It's about listening, understanding, and finding common ground. But perhaps the most profound impact was felt outside the halls of government. Ordinary people, teachers, students, parents, workers, began stepping up in their own communities. Inspired by Jasmine's example, they organized cleanup drives, fundraisers, and mentorship programs. They spoke up at school board meetings, wrote letters to elected officials, and volunteered their time to causes they cared about. One woman shared how she finally quit her toxic job after hearing Jasmine say, "You don't have to accept disrespect to survive." A teenager posted online about starting a club at his high school to support underrepresented students, crediting Jasmine's courage as the push he needed to get started. Even celebrities and influencers joined the wave of inspiration. Social media campaigns popped up encouraging people to share stories of times they stood up for themselves or others. Hashtags like "Ryo Stand Your Ground" and "Ryo Courage Over Comfort" trended worldwide, creating a sense of unity among strangers thousands of miles apart. It was proof that sometimes all it takes is one person to speak out for others to find their voices too. On the other side of the equation, Kash's career took a different trajectory. After weeks of trying and failing to regain public trust, he largely disappeared from the spotlight. His name occasionally surfaced in articles analyzing the fallout from the debate, but it was always in connection with what many called a lesson in hubris. Analysts pointed out that his attempt to belittle someone else backfired spectacularly, reminding everyone that respect matters, not just in politics, but in life. Some speculated that he might re-emerge someday, humbler and wiser, while others believed his moment in the sun had passed for good. As the months turned into a year, Jasmine reflected on everything that had happened. In a heartfelt speech during an award ceremony where she received recognition for her advocacy work, she shared a story that resonated deeply with the audience. "They tried to bury me," she said, pausing for effect. "But they didn't. Realize I'm a seed." The room erupted in applause, and the phrase quickly became a rallying cry for anyone facing adversity. It encapsulated everything her journey represented: growth, strength, and the unstoppable force of perseverance. Looking back, analysts agreed that the debate marked a pivotal moment in modern politics. It highlighted the growing demand for leaders who are authentic, relatable, and unafraid to challenge the status quo. It also underscored the importance of representation. Seeing someone stand tall and speak truth to power gave hope to millions who rarely saw themselves reflected in positions of influence. The legacy of that night stretched far beyond the individuals involved. It became a case study in how moments of conflict can spark movements for change. Schools included it in curriculums to teach students about resilience and communication. Nonprofits cited it as an example of how grassroots activism can thrive when fueled by passion and purpose, and everyday people carried its lessons with them, applying them to their own lives whenever they faced challenges. In the end, the story wasn't just about winning or losing, it was about rising above. It was about proving that words matter, actions matter, and courage matters. It showed that when you refuse to let someone else define your worth, you open doors not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. And so, the tale of that fiery debate didn't fade into history. It became part of it. It reminded us all that even in the toughest moments, there's an opportunity to shine. Whether you're standing in front of millions on live TV or simply navigating the challenges of daily life, the choice is yours. Will you shrink, or will you rise? For Jasmine, and for everyone she inspired, the answer was clear.